Okay, welcome back to English 491. This is the second lecture for week 1. I'm going to try to do this all in one video in one take, but make no guarantees because we are trying to compress into a very short presentation a subject which is one of the basic branches of linguistics, and that is phonology, which is the study of how languages are made up of sounds as systems of meaning, and how the fundamental building blocks of meaning come down to the distinction between individual sounds and how we articulate and detect those differences in sounds. That is phonology. It is different from phonetics. Phonetics is studies more closely how we make sounds in an anatomical way. It can be closer to physics or biology in some ways, but phonology is more interested in language as a system rather than as a kind of physical activity or product. There are 3 ways to approach the sound of human language from a scientific point of view. One is from the perceptual point of view. This relates to psychology and psychoacoustics. How does the brain perceive language? How do we hear different frequencies? How do we distinguish different sounds? How do our ears work? How does the ear transmit the data of sound to our brain, and how does our brain process it? These are all interesting subjects, but they are not the subject of phonology. Then there is the acoustic point of view, acoustics being a branch of physics, and this studies how the kind of sounds that make up language, and again, it can relate to how we perceive them too. And finally, we can look at language from the articulatory point of view, that is, how our speech organs produce sound. And the way we classify sounds in linguistics is by how our mouth and our throat and our nasal cavity and the other parts of the other speech organs produce sound. And so human beings, one of the interesting things about human beings is that we've evolved to be able to speak. One thing that human beings can do that most other mammals can't is choke to death on our food. A cat or a dog or a cow will never choke to death on their food, but we have this part of our mouth called the larynx, which has been specially modified so that we have a high degree of control over pitch and volume based on these vibrating strands, but the trade-off for that is that we can get stuff stuck in our throat. So the sinuses, the pharynx, which is this area back here at the very back of our the very top of our throat. If you ever get a bad cough, this is the part that gets inflamed. If you have pharyngitis and you lose your voice, you can't, or actually that's laryngitis. Pharyngitis just hurts to cough. Your lips, your tongue, your teeth, your nasal cavity, all of these things are used to produce sound, but one of the most important things is your vocal cords, your voice box. You know what, I'm going to give a separate link to this video of vocal cords vibrating. It's really nasty. Oh wait, here we go.
Here is a look at some normal young female vocal cords during a stroboscopic exam.
Cute, huh? All right, it's enough of that that nightmarishness. I don't even know what's going on there. Anyway, the point here is that the higher the higher the bandwidth or the higher the frequency of the wave, the higher the pitch, and the lower the frequency, the broader the wave, the lower the pitch. This is why smokers, that thing gets covered in tar and it slows down the the vibration, and it just distorts the vibration, which is why smokers get deeper and sort of more gritty voices. So we can divide all the different things that produce speech into articulators and points of articulation. And this is the things that we can move and control are articulators. Your lips are articulators because you can use them to make specific sounds like b and p and f, and same with teeth. The teeth, as in the word sound th itself in teeth, the teeth is used as a point of articulation. In a lot of we also have something called the alveolar ridge right here, and that's that little bump behind your teeth. And in Indo-European languages, we use, in English I should say specifically, we use the alveolar ridge to make lots of sounds, like d and t and s and n and d, and did I say that one already? I can't remember. But other languages will produce the same phoneme on the back of the teeth rather than on the alveolar ridge. Like many dialects of Spanish will say da and ta and na and so forth, which is why if you want to speak good Spanish, you should learn to articulate those sounds as dentals, not as alveolars. So dedos for fingers, not dedos for. This is just a little tip for you. So yeah, we have the alveolar ridge, and that's a point of articulation. The palate is a point of articulation. When you say the letter J, you can feel your tongue, or G. That's a better example. You say G as in good job. Your G, your tongue, which is one of your articulators, the body of the tongue, goes up against there and stops the air from flowing through for a little while. Now we'll get on to that. This is the oral cavity, as it's called. It's where sound vibrates. Then you have this thing back here, the velum, and the velum is in some languages like German, ich is a velar fricative, but the English doesn't use the velar for that many things. There's also the uvula here, that little hanging little like boxing speed bag thing that like from the old cartoons that you can vibrate. And in French, the R, the ir, like rire, is made with an uvular vibration. Then there's the pharynx. In English, we don't use that for many sounds, but in Arabic they do. For example, there's a ah sound, like ayn, that is used by constricting your pharynx. So not all languages use every articulator and point of articulation, but they're all get used by all of the languages, and any possible thing that can be used is used in some language or other. And there's also the nasal cavity, right? This is important in the production of speech. As you know, if you've ever had a cold and tried to say a word like minimal. Imagine saying the word minimal with a cold. It comes like minimal. You end up saying like minimal, because your nasal cavity can't vibrate because it's all stuffed up. We're just getting all kinds of gross here. Then there's the epiglottis, the esophagus, these things are not used for speech normally, although somebody who's had, say, for example, laryngeal cancer and had them removed can be taught to use their esophagus to make sound, but it's not ideal. But your larynx is down here, and this is where you vibrate. This is where you vibrate to make that sound. I guess if you've ever tried to belch the alphabet like a middle schooler, you've tried to use the esophagus in the production of the speech, but as that exercise will demonstrate, it's not an easy thing to do. Okay, so these are all the different kinds of sounds these are all the different ways that you can make sound, and all the different basic sounds that you can make are called, as units of meaning, a phoneme. And this word "eme" is a thing that we find in linguistics at the end of, it's sort of a root in linguistics that means a significant item, something that is used as a building block in meaning. A phoneme is a group of sounds that never contrast significantly with one another, that speakers treat as the same sound. And as I said in a previous video, this varies from language to language. B and P are phonemic in English. They are different sounds. But in other languages, b and p are considered the same sound because that minimal distinction of voiced versus unvoiced doesn't exist. Now, what does that mean, voiced versus unvoiced? Well, do me a favor here. Say z as in zip, and put your hand to your throat, and hold your throat as you say z, and then say s, like a hissing serpent, and then touch your hand to your throat. S, z, s, z. Feel the difference? When you say z, you can feel a vibration in your throat, and that's your larynx, your vocal cords vibrating. And so one of the ways that a sound can be precisely the same in terms of how the tongue, the teeth, and all the other articulators and points of articulation are positioned relative to one another, but they can distinguish between whether you're vibrating your larynx as you pass air out of your lungs or not. Or two phonemes can be distinct from each other based on the shape of the tongue. So r and l are really close, very similar, except when you say r, your tongue is sort of squashed together into a sharp point, whereas you say l, you kind of broaden your tongue and flatten it. But the tip of the tongue will be in the same spot. And that distinction isn't operative in a lot of languages, which is why in some languages, like Japanese, R and L are not phonemes, but are allophones, non-contrastive variants that comprise a phoneme. And now, one of the funny thing is, if you watch that other video, it'll explain phonemes and allophones. The one under recommended videos explains this idea of the allophone and the minimal pair very well. So if you want to take a deeper dive in there, go look there. But basically, the minimal pair are two phonemes distinguished by only one contrasting feature: t versus d, n versus d. See, both of these are voiced, but this one, n versus d, this one's nasal. Try to say n while you're holding your nose. Duh. It comes out duh because you're, anyway. S versus sh, g versus ng. What? What's that? That's the ng sound, which in English we only put at the end of words. But in other languages, such as Vietnamese, you might find this sound, like in the common Vietnamese surname Nguyen, at the beginning of a word. So, those are phonemes. And we organize phonemes according to not an arbitrary alphabet that was handed down to us by Phoenicians or Greeks or Romans, but according to their manner of articulation and point of articulation. And so these are the phonemes of English. P, B, these are both bilabial stops, voiceless and voiced. T, D, K, G. So as you can see, this describes where you're putting your tongue, this or other parts of your mouth, and this describes how. So a stop is a full stoppage of the air. K and G, there's a point at which the air isn't flowing and then it's released again. An affricate is where it almost stops, but it kind of explodes past it. So in English, we have the affricates ch and j, the voiced and unvoiced version of the same sound. Do you think that I am choking? In the fricatives are where we almost close it, but not quite, and the air continues to pass through a constriction in the oral cavity, but that constriction creates a kind of noise. If you've ever seen a river narrow and you see the sort of the turbulence that's after, that turbulence in the air creates the distinctive sound of fricatives. And these don't come across in recordings or on phones very well. It's why the S and the F sound can sometimes sound the same on a phone or in a recording, because if the fidelity isn't good. So, but we have f versus v, th versus the, which again in English these are allophones, but in other languages these are different phonemes, th and the. S versus z, sh versus zh, and h. Then we have the nasal sounds of n, and again, we only find at the end of words in English. a lateral alveolar L versus a retroflex alveolar R. Now this is referring to American English, because in American English, North American English, we have a much stronger R sound than they do in other dialects of English. And then there are what are called the semi-vowels, and that is you only get kind of a half-closed sound, and that's w, y. That J there is not a J, but a y sound, and a velar well, I don't know what's going on there. So here's a key to all these different symbols. You'll see them also at the end of lyra, and I would have you look at these consonants on this thing again and get and familiarize yourself with these symbols, because we're going to be seeing them throughout the entire class. And as far as vowels, we organize vowels. This is a little different. It's a little more complicated and subjective in a way, but we organize vowels according to the position of the tongue in the mouth when we produce them. So when you say, if you produce a high front vowel, that means you are putting your tongue high and towards the front of your mouth. Imagine this is a very stylized diagram of your mouth looking at your face from the left side. Put your tongue up here and go and just yee, just sort of vibrate your vocal cords. Yee. And now slide your tongue back. O, e, o, l. Those are mid vowels. So your tongue is at the middle of your mouth, but towards the front. E, ah. E, ah. As you try to take a moment to try to reproduce those sounds with me. E, actually that's an I'm sorry. Ah. And you can feel your tongue moving back in your mouth. Ah, 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 ah. And these are the vowels of English, basically. And if you keep your tongue in the back and move it from the top to the bottom, it's ooh, ooh, yeah. And there you can feel your tongue moving from top to the bottom at the front of your mouth. So yeah, this is a key with common words that describe the various vowel sounds of English. And English has not a few vowel sounds. Again, some differences in vowels are phonemic in some languages and not in others. I had I lived in a French-speaking place in Quebec for a while, and there they have a number of different sounds that are all squashed together in English. We roughly say oo or you or boo, or sometimes we have foot, right? But in French, there's ew, there's oo, there's oo, and it's very easy for English speakers to mess those up. In addition, in English, we also have what are called glides or diphthongs, which are combinations of vowels. So we can see here I as in by, ow as in bow, and boy as in boy. And you'll notice here that we're talking about standard American English, because by, that diphthong is flattened in Southern English, and it's buy. So I would like to buy if you're Southern, but I would like to buy in Standard English. But these are the basic diphthongs of American English. I, ow, oi. Three phonemic diphthongs. So finally, let's just review the essential concepts of phonology that are important for what you need to know in thinking about sounds in English and the history of language and how they change. Speech is produced by articulators, the movable part of the speech tract, and points of articulation, the non-movable part of the speech tract with which an articulator comes into contact or near contact. A phoneme is the smallest speech unit that can distinguish one word from another, cat from cap. An allophone is any of the non-distinctive variants of a phoneme. And what's weird, actually, and that other video points out, is that sometimes an allophone of one phoneme can be another phoneme in a different environment. So, for example, if you say input, a lot of times you're not saying input, you're saying input. You turn that N into an M. So in that particular environment, M is an allophone of N. I'm not going to get too deep into this stuff. As I said, phonology is a whole subject unto itself. You can take entire courses in it if you're at a university that offers a linguistics major. I'm not sure about here, but it's an important part of linguistic study. The consonant phonemes in, what does PDE stand for now? Present-day English. Consonant phonemes are distinguished by the point of articulation, the part of the oral cavity that the tongue makes contact with, and a manner of resolution, of articulation, how breath is controlled. There are stops, fricatives, affricates, and resonants. A resonant is also called a continuant, is a sound where you can continue to make it. Like, you can't say a D, you can't hold a D or a P or another stop, right? They're stops, they're a point in time. But a sound like Z or W or V or Sh are resonants, and they will continue, you can continue to hold that consonant, so to speak. And consonants are also distinguished on the basis of whether they are voiced or voiceless. Vowel phonemes in present-day English are distinguished by the height of the tongue, high, mid, or low, and the location in the mouth of the highest part of the tongue, front, central, or back. If the tongue is relatively tense, the vowel is tense. If the tongue is relatively laxed, the vowel is lax. So, for example, E is a tense vowel, I is a relaxed vowel, and U is a tense vowel, is a lax vowel. So you can feel the different degree to which you have to sort of make your tongue tense to make these different sounds. There's a lot more detail that we could go into, but I think the evil onto the day is sufficient there too. This video is meant to accompany your reading of Millward and to flesh it out for you. Please get at me if you have any questions about phonology. The important thing here is that you familiarize yourself with the main symbols for English phonology, and that you understand the basic concept of articulators and the different classes of sounds that we can make. Talk to you soon.